The ballroom of the Washington Hilton shimmered with gold light, a blend of laughter, anticipation, and underlying tension hanging in the air. It was the night of the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, a tradition famous for its mix of humor, humility, and the occasional political sting. Every year, presidents, journalists, and celebrities gathered to laugh at themselves and, sometimes, at each other. But this particular evening, the tension was thicker than usual. The cameras were sharper, the whispers louder, and the stakes, higher than ever. Barack Obama, dressed in a sleek tuxedo, sat at the head table, his posture relaxed but alert. He was no longer president, but his presence still commanded attention. His laugh, his gestures, even the way he lifted a glass of water, everything about him radiated composure. Next to him sat Michelle, poised and elegant, her eyes scanning the crowd. The two of them had done this dance before, the glitz, the speeches, the jokes, but tonight, there was something different. Something brewing. At the far end of the ballroom, the double doors swung open, and a collective murmur rippled across the room. Donald Trump had arrived. He walked in with his signature stride, shoulders squared, chin up, his familiar half-smirk plastered on his face. Cameras instantly turned toward him, flashes erupting like fireworks. The media loved moments like this, the former president and the man who had spent years taunting him, now sharing the same spotlight. Trump adjusted his tie, gave a brief nod to a few supporters in the crowd, and made his way toward his table. He wasn't on the official speakers list, everyone knew that, but he had a way of making himself part of every story, whether he was invited or not. Obama noticed the commotion but didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned toward Michelle and whispered something that made her chuckle softly. That calm, unbothered demeanor only seemed to annoy Trump more. As dinner plates clinked and murmurs filled the air, the host for the night, a well-known comedian, kicked things off with light-hearted jokes. But as the night rolled on, people kept glancing toward Trump. He was restless. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't clapping. And when the time came for open remarks, Trump suddenly rose from his seat and gestured for the microphone. The MC hesitated, unsure if this was part of the program. But Trump waved his hand confidently, saying, "Just a quick word, I promise." The crowd exchanged wary looks. Obama raised an eyebrow but remained seated, sipping calmly from his glass. Trump took the stage, straightened his jacket, and gripped the microphone like a man about to command a rally. "You know," he began, his tone casual but edged with challenge, "these dinners are always so polite, so boring. I thought maybe we could add a little honesty to the room tonight." Nervous laughter trickled through the crowd. Obama's eyes narrowed slightly. Trump paced slowly, soaking in the attention. "We've had a lot of presidents come and go," he said. "Some were doers, some were talkers. Obama here," he gestured toward the former president, "he was a great talker. Probably the best. Smooth voice, great speeches. People cried when he spoke. But after 8 years, what did America really get? More division, more apologies, more speeches." A few gasps rippled through the audience. Even in a room accustomed to political roasting, this was crossing a line. Trump, however, was in his element. He smirked, letting the silence hang before continuing. "See, I build things. Real things. Towers. Businesses. Jobs. When I put my name on something, it stands tall. It lasts. Obama, you put your name on a promise, and then left it to others to clean up." A murmur of disapproval swept through the crowd. The comedian MC shifted awkwardly, and a few aides whispered frantically to one another. This wasn't satire anymore, this was personal. Obama didn't move. He sat still, calm as a lake, his fingers interlaced on the table. But Michelle noticed the subtle shift in his posture, the slight tightening of his jaw. That was the signal. He was listening carefully, weighing every word. Trump wasn't finished. "Let's be real," he continued, "if it weren't for me, people wouldn't even be talking about American pride again. We'd still be apologizing to the world. Barack was too busy worrying about how the world saw us instead of how America saw itself." The line drew a few hesitant laughs from Trump loyalists near the back, but the rest of the ballroom fell silent. No one dared to interrupt. For a moment, Trump's grin faltered. The silence wasn't the approval he expected, it was the sound of discomfort. Still, he pressed on. "Some people like to be remembered for their words," he said, looking directly at Obama. "Me, I prefer to be remembered for results." Obama lifted his head, his gaze meeting Trump's squarely. It was a quiet stare, not angry, not mocking, just steady, confident, and utterly composed. The kind of stare that said more than any words could. Trump, perhaps sensing that his moment was slipping, tried to end on a triumphant note. Anyway, it's good to see you, Barack. I hope the speeches are still paying well. He laughed at his own jab, but the laughter wasn't returned. The MC awkwardly reclaimed the mic, thanking Trump and trying to move on, but the energy in the room had shifted. The crowd was holding its breath. All eyes turned to Obama. He remained still for a few seconds, tapping his index finger gently against the tablecloth. Then, with a quiet sigh and a faint smile, he stood. The movement was subtle, yet it commanded the entire room. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The hum of the cameras dimmed. Trump turned slightly, his smirk faltering just enough to betray curiosity, maybe even apprehension. Michelle looked up at her husband knowingly. "You're going to say something," she murmured. Obama leaned down slightly and whispered, "Just one thing." He buttoned his jacket, took a slow breath, and began walking toward the stage. The crowd parted like water. His presence was magnetic, every eye in the room followed him. Even the photographers, who had spent the night chasing celebrity shots, forgot to click for a moment. As he reached the microphone, he paused, his hand resting lightly on the podium. He glanced at Trump, who now sat with his arms crossed, his smirk tightening into a line. Obama gave a small smile, not forced, not political, just genuine. "Donald," he began, his voice low but firm, "you know, I wasn't going to say anything tonight. But since you've shared your thoughts, I think it's only fair I share mine." The crowd leaned forward. The moment had arrived. The stage was set. Every camera turned toward Obama as he stood under the golden light, looking perfectly calm, but in his eyes, there was that spark. The same one the world had seen during debates, during crises, during history itself. Trump had come to insult him. Obama was about to answer. Not with anger, not with mockery, but with a single sentence that would remind everyone in that room why his words still had the power to change everything. Obama stood behind the podium, his expression composed, his presence commanding. The golden lights above shimmered against the black of his tuxedo, making him seem almost larger than life, a calm giant standing before a storm. The entire ballroom fell silent. Forks stopped midair, whispers died, and every camera in the room focused in. Even Trump, seated, with his arms crossed, felt the shift in the air. Something was coming, and everyone could feel it. Obama adjusted the microphone slightly. "You know, Donald," he began, his voice smooth and steady, "I've noticed something about you over the years." He paused, just long enough for tension to thicken. "You really want people to think you're the smartest guy in the room." The crowd chuckled nervously. Trump's jaw twitched. Obama smiled faintly. "And that's fine. Confidence is good, but there's a difference between confidence and insecurity. Wearing confidence as a mask." He tilted his head slightly, as though studying Trump like a curious subject. "You see, when you truly know who you are, you don't need to prove it every 5 minutes." The audience erupted in laughter and applause. Even those who tried to stay neutral couldn't help it. The timing, the delivery, the grace, it was masterful. Obama waited patiently, letting the noise die down before continuing. "When I was in office," he said, his tone softening, "I learned something important. Leadership isn't about who talks the loudest or who gets the most attention. It's about who listens. It's about who takes the blame when things go wrong and gives credit when things go right. That's what makes people trust you." He paused, scanning the crowd. His gaze landed back on Trump. "You've built towers, businesses, and yes, a brand. But what you've never built," he said quietly, "is trust." The air was electric. Reporters scribbled furiously. Trump shifted in his seat, trying to maintain his composure, but his smirk had melted into a tight-lipped glare. Obama's tone remained kind, almost disarming. "And look, I get it," he continued. "You like to win. You like to be the center of attention. You think leadership is about domination, about being the biggest guy in the room. But here's the thing. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It speaks for itself through actions, through integrity, through how people remember you when you're gone." The crowd nodded in silence. Michelle watched him proudly, that small knowing smile on her face, the one that said, "He's in control now." Obama glanced at Trump again, his eyes steady. "So when you say you build things, I won't argue with that. You've built a lot, but when I look at this country, at the young people who believe they can make a difference, at the families who still dream big despite their struggles, that's what I tried to build. Not towers, not casinos, hope." That word, hope, hit like a wave. The room was still. For a long second, no one even breathed. Then Obama leaned slightly forward and said, "And here's the funny thing about hope, Donald. You can't sell it, you can't brand it, you can't slap your name on it. You either inspire it, or you don't." Applause erupted again, louder this time. Some people stood. Even a few of Trump's former supporters in the audience couldn't hide their appreciation. Cameras flashed, and news anchors whispered into their microphones, already knowing this would dominate headlines for days. But Obama wasn't done. He took a sip of water, waited for the room to settle, and then said the line that would echo far beyond that ballroom. "You can insult me all you want," he said calmly, looking directly at Trump. "You can mock what I've done, twist my words, even question my motives. But here's the difference between you and me, Donald." He paused, letting the silence draw out, the weight of the moment stretching across every corner of the hall. "I don't need to tear someone down to feel tall." The words landed like a thunderclap. For a full 3 seconds, no one moved. Then, a roar. The audience leapt to their feet. Applause thundered across the ballroom like a wave, rolling through the sea. People stood, clapping, cheering, whistling. Some chanted, "Obama, Obama," while others simply stood in awe of the effortless precision of his response. Trump sat frozen. His expression was unreadable, but behind the mask of indifference, there was something else. Something that looked an awful lot like disbelief. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He didn't even attempt one. Obama waited, smiling humbly as the crowd continued. When it finally calmed, he gave a small, almost teasing nod toward Trump. "See, Donald, it's not personal. I just believe that what you say about others usually says more about you than them." More laughter, more applause. He stepped away from the podium, giving a polite nod to the audience and another to the MC, who looked stunned but delighted. As Obama returned to his seat, the cameras followed him every step of the way. Michelle leaned close and whispered, "You didn't even break a sweat." He grinned, his voice low. "Didn't need to." Trump's team scrambled, phones buzzing, reporters surging toward him for a reaction. But he said nothing. He simply stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked out, his expression tight and unreadable. The crowd barely noticed. They were still buzzing over Obama's words. By morning, the video had gone viral, tens of millions of views within hours. It dominated every social media platform. News outlets replayed the moment again and again, dissecting every expression, every pause, every word. Headlines read, "Obama silences Trump with one line." "The ultimate mic drop. Barack Obama reminds America what leadership looks like." Commentators called it, "the most elegant takedown in modern politics." Others said it wasn't even a takedown, it was a lesson. Obama hadn't just defended himself, he'd reframed the entire concept of power and respect. Even people who didn't always agree with his politics admitted it was one of the most dignified, powerful comebacks they'd ever seen. His words, "I don't need to tear someone down to feel tall," trended worldwide. They appeared on t-shirts, memes, and editorial headlines. Meanwhile, Trump tried to regain footing, calling the event a setup, and claiming Obama rehearsed it. But the damage was done. The world had seen the difference between the two men, one ruled by ego, the other by poise. A week later, during an interview, a journalist asked Obama if he had planned that line in advance. He chuckled softly. "No," he said, "that's just what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. Eventually, you remind them that dignity doesn't shout, it speaks." It was classic Obama, articulate, composed, disarming. And for millions watching, it was a reminder that true strength isn't about dominating the conversation. It's about owning the moment without losing yourself in it. In the end, Trump had come to the dinner hoping to embarrass Obama. But Obama had done something far greater. He'd turned an insult into a masterclass in leadership, showing the world that sometimes, the most powerful way to win isn't by fighting fire with fire, but by standing taller without saying much at all. And that one sentence, calm, humble, and unforgettable, changed everything.